We are in chapter 32 to be at Parsha Hazinu, and this is a poem, a song that Moshe sings, and it's a very important song. In fact, the end of the last Parsha deals with this song, and Moshe says that you have to write this song, and he spoke all these songs incomplete, this entire song complete. Rambam even says that the obligation to write a Torah is because you have to write this song, and you can't just write the song, so you write the whole Torah, right? So obviously there's a mitzvah to write the whole Torah, but what he's saying is that this encapsulates in a certain way the message of the Torah. So now we have to look at this and say, okay, so let's read the song, see what it is, and what's the message. We're not going to be able to analyze the entire Shiras Ha'azinu throughout, but I want to look at a few points. But first, let's read the entire song, because it really is one in the whole. The halacha actually is that in various sections of the Torah, you can add aliyahs and cut aliyahs and so on. This song has specific way of where the breaks are, and you cannot add or cut out any of the aliyahs, because it's like any art form, right? You can have a sentence, and that gives you information. But when you have a poem, when you have a song, having one particular phrase, they're not giving you anything. Right? If you have a piece of art and you just see one piece, you're not getting the whole picture. So too over here, you really need the entirety of the song in order to get this. And that's why in the last verse of the previous Parsha, in the introduction of this song says, and Moshe spoke this to all of Am Yisrael, to the congregation of Israel, the words of this song's incomplete, all right, until its end, the entirety. That's the way the introduction, because you cannot have part of the song without the rest of it. It's an entire message. Like you can't just take one slice of the Torah. You can analyze it, learn that, but it's a whole package. So too the song is entire. So let's quickly go through I'll read it in the Hirsch translation of the song, and then we're going to go back and just look at various parts of the song and some messages we can learn. Incline your ear, O heaven, I would speak. Let the earth hear the words of my mouth, so that my teaching may penetrate like a rain breaking up the soil, that my promise may flow gently like the dew, like rainstorms in the meadow, and like pouring rains on the grass. For it is the name of Hashem that I proclaim. Ascribe greatness to Hashem, to our God. The rock, his work is perfect. All of his ways are justice. A God of trust and no violence. Righteous and upright is he. Their moral frailty has corrupted it to become non-children. A generation persistent in crookedness, breaking away in opposition. Pray, ask yourselves, is this how you repay God? Oh, people withered and in no way wise. Is he not your father who calls you his own? Did he not form you when he gave you your purpose? Remember the days of old. Understand the years of the generations. Ask your father, he will tell you. Your elders, they will explain it to you. When the Most High assigned property to the nations, when he separated the sons of men, he set the territories of people for the children of Israel who are yet to be counted. For Hashem's portion is his people, Yaakov, the lot of his inheritance. He sought him out in the desert land, in desolation, a howling wilderness. He surrounds him, instructs him, watches over him as the apple of his eye. As an eagle first stirs up his nest, hovering over its young, then spreads out its wings, takes it carrying it aloft upon the pinions. So would Hashem lead him apart, and no alien God beside him. He made him climb the high places of the earth. He ate the fruits of the field. He suckled him with honey from the rock, and from the soil, and with the oil from the gravel of rock. The cream of cattle and sheep's milk, and the fat of sheep, and ram's bread and Bashan and he goats, with fat from the kidneys of wheat, and the blood of the grape you drank as fermented wine. Then Yeshurun, which means the upright, became fat and kicked. Whenever you become fat, you become obese and overwhelmed by fat. And he forsook Hashem, who had made him, and regarded as worthless the rock of his salvation. They impaired his rights with aliens, angering him with abominations. They made offerings to demons that were non-gods, deities of whom they knew nothing, new ones that came up of late, whom your fathers never dreaded. The rock had hardly borne you when you gave up to the homage of others and forgot Hashem, while he was still forming you. Hashem saw this and turned away in disdain because of annoyance from his sons and daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end will be, for they are a generation of constant changes, sons in whom there is no trust. They have violated my right with non-gods, angered me with their trifles. I will have their rights violated by non-peoples, cause them grief through a withered nation. For the fire was kindled by my anger, therefore it burned to the nethermost depths. It consumed the land and its fruit and set the foundations of mountains ablaze. I will let evil upon evil come upon them. I will use up my arrows against them. Emaciation of hunger, heat of fever, bitterness of death, and the teeth of beasts will I send against them, with the fury of things that creep in the dust. The sword will bereave them from the outside, and terror from within. Young man and maiden, infant and hoary head, elderly. I would say, I put them in a corner, make their memory disappear from among mankind. If I would not thereby amass unpleasantness from the enemy, their oppressors could misunderstand it. They would say, oh, our hand is high. It is not God who has caused all this. For they too are a nation that perishes in its own plans, and insight is not found among them. If they were wise, they would put their minds to this. They would discern their own end. How can one pursue 1,000 or two put 10,000 to flight? If not that their rock had surrendered them, that Hashem had delivered them up. For their rock is like no other rock. Our enemies themselves are judges of this. For their vine is the vine of Sodom, and from open country of Amorah. Their grapes are poisonous grapes, clusters of bitterness to them. The fury of dragons is their wine, and the cruel poison of vipers. Therefore, it lies concealed with me, sealed up within my treasuries. Mine is the office of avenger and retribution. At the appointed time, their foot will slip, and the day of their smoke cloud is near. It rushes towards them in events to come. For God will judge his people and reveal himself in a changed decree concerning his servants, when he sees that all power has vanished and nothing is left to keep or abandon. Then he will say, where are their gods now? The rock in whom they placed their trust. Those who were to eat the fat of their meal offerings, drink the wine of their libations. Let them rise up and help you, so that you may have protection. See now that I am indeed I. There is no God beside me. I put to death and restore to life. I inflict wounds and I heal. Nothing can be snatched from my hand. For I raise my hand to heaven, and I say, I live forever. Were I sharp, were I to sharpen the lightning of my sword, were my hand to take up justice, were I to turn vengeance back upon my enemies and repay those who hate me, I would have to make my arrows drunk with blood, and my sword would devour flesh, and the blood of the slain and the captive, and the curly heads of the enemy. Therefore, O nations, make his people's lot a happy one. For he will avenge the blood of his servants, and he will turn back vengeance upon the enemies, and his people will atone for his world.
Wow.
A little heavy.
I'm stuck on the smoke tower, the cloud of smoke.
Yes.
I was like, wait.
So as it starts off, it says, this is the history. Okay, you got to ask your fathers and ask the elderly. So this is the history of the world. But the history of the world is to teach a message that people have a perspective and they lose it when they get power or wealth. And then they consume each other. And there's no faith. And then one will destroy the other. But ultimately, treat my people well, because there will be retribution, and they will bring the ultimate redemption to the world. They will be the atonement for the universe. So that's the short of the song. Obviously, there's a lot of messages. Let's go through some of them. But
I have one question. Can I ask a question? At the beginning of the song, it sounded as though we were talking about Hashem's relationship with Yaakov. And then all of a sudden, we moved on to future generations which had turned away from that rock, so to speak. And I got stuck in the transition because I was hearing the connection to Yaakov, and then I got kind of lost the connection.
great. So let's go through beginning a little bit and see how far we can go in getting some of the message, and hopefully you'll be able to do the rest of it. So Ha'azinu hashamayim v'adaber. Listen, heavens, put your ear to it, and I will speak. Listen, earth, to the words of my mouth. Heaven and earth, the purpose of creation itself, is encapsulated here in this song. Heaven and earth must hear this. Yarov kamata likhi tizal katalim rasi. Let my words like rain and dew come upon the field, like rainstorms into the grass. In other words, this must bear fruit. These words have to penetrate and really be the source of growth for the universe, meaning for the human, who is the purpose of the universe. Kishem Hashem Ekra, for the name of God I proclaim. Now, it's unique here. Shem Hashem over here does not mean I'm proclaiming the name of Hashem, because he doesn't. Rather, it's the relationship. And we talked about this many times, that Shem, the name, when we talk about God, there's no name, there's no essence, so we're not naming the essence. So we talked about this briefly sometimes, like you have different molecules. So you have a proton or an electron, right? These are actual pieces of matter and we're naming it based on how they act. But then there are some things that we're naming based on relationship, not actually based on something, such as gravity. Right? Gravity is not a thing. Gravity is the reaction, the interaction of things. So it's a relationship. So when we talk about the name of Hashem as well, all the names of Hashem, besides for the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, which somehow deals with the Hashem not being constrained by time space, because it's past, present, or future, the God of timelessness and eternity, the eternal. So that is more of essence, if you could. All the other names are names of relationship. What is the ultimate relationship with Hashem? The Torah. Kishem Hashem Ekra, because the name of God I proclaim, meaning I'm giving you the very essence of Torah, within this call. Within this song, what I am telling you is the song of the word of Torah. I'm giving you the essence of Torah within this song. Kishem Hashem Ekra. Havu Godel Lelokenu. With this, ascribe greatness to God. The Midrash tells us, that the Gemara tells us, that one of only two places in the Torah that the Torah obligates us to say a blessing on something, a bracha, are the blessing before learning Torah and the blessing after eating food. You will eat, you'll be satiated, and you will bless. So there's the blessing after eating, you have full meal, and the blessing prior to Torah. I call the name of God, Hashem, which is, I read Torah, because the name of Hashem is the relationship, Torah, the essential, the core of the relationship with Hashem. Havu Godel Leilokenu, make that great, meaning define it as great, read the blessing. So Moshe says, and the first part, the introduction, the essence of the universe, the essence of creation and purpose, the relationship with the divine, and our opportunity to make that a focal point of our existence. What was that, Jacob? No. Verse 4, Pasuk Dalet, Hatzur Tamim Pa'alo. So the Hirsch translation and many translations read the rock. Hatzur, the rock, Tamim Pa'alo, his work is perfect. So actually, Tzur doesn't only mean rock, it also means the one who forms. So the tzayar, the artist. Hatzur Tamim Pa'alo, his work is complete, is a literal translation. The artist's work is complete. And this is very deep, because when we look at any snippet of history, it's like looking at any snippet of a piece of art. It doesn't give you the picture. It's frustratingly incomplete and frustratingly inexplicable. You can look at a piece of art that's just started, and you're like, oh, what is that? Especially if it's not, like an exact portrait or something, right? If there's depth to it, or it's a little bit more creative. You look at it, you don't know what it is. Same with a piece of music, or a song, right? A shira. If you only have one aspect of it, you don't understand what it's giving you, what it's doing. So Hatzur Tamim Pa'alo, his work is complete. That's what its perfection is. Because only once you have all the aspects and they work together do you finally hear and appreciate the value. And this is sometimes our existence, where we live in just a snippet. We don't only live in a specific snippet of time, meaning an era, but also in space, right? We think the world is smoky. No, our area in the world is smoky. And somewhere else, it's hurricane. And somewhere else, it's beautiful. And somewhere else, it's something else, right? So our existence is not only a little snippet in the history of time. It is also only a snippet of what the current existence is. And so we don't get a full picture. It's like looking at a piece of art with a magnifying glass in one corner. Right? You don't get it, you don't get a sense of it. You have to step back far and get a whole picture and take some time to look at it, to be able to appreciate the entirety of what that image is, of what that sculpture is, of what that formation is. History is that way. The world, for us, we have to look back from the beginning and learn the messages of the world in order to understand its direction, its purpose, our role in that direction. And then we can see eventually the completeness of the work, tamim, the perfection of the work. But only when it's complete, only when we can see the whole thing. And therefore, we know, even though we cannot see, that all of his ways are justice, a God of faithfulness and no violence, righteousness and upright is he. So the unique introduction here is that the rest of the song, and much of the rest of the song, speaks of violence, speaks of seeming injustice. And Moshe says, yes, that's precisely history, because you're only looking at a snippet. And then you don't see what it is. You don't see the purpose of creation. You don't see your own very role, and you don't see the result, the end that is meant to be and will be. And that's the entirety of the Torah. And that's what this song is. I want to show you in song, in history. In a song, history is brutal. You know, history is not, not roses. There are a few roses, right? And usually it's about a war of the roses, right? It's something. It's not. It's very tough. But if we don't understand where it's leading and what it's trying to do, bring the world to a place of where humans can choose the goodness that the Torah teaches us, that Moshe has held last week. It said, I place before you life and goodness, death and evil. Choose the goodness. Choose life. It seems so obvious, but not obvious at all, because so many people don't choose the goodness, don't choose the Tov and life. And so this song says, you're going to see snippets through history, and they're going to look very harsh and very difficult if you don't understand the essence of why we're here. If you don't understand your very existence. Hatzur Tamim Palod, the artist, the tzayar, the one who forms and shapes history. His work is perfect, but perfect not because there's no mistake. Perfect because it's complete. And when you have the complete picture, when you have the complete song, when you have the complete, every intricate part and how they interact, only then do you see the perfection, and only in the complete picture do you see that there is no injustice. It is pure and right. Shiches lo banav mumam. And when there is destruction to him, it is actually those that don't see themselves as children of Hashem. That's the blemish that brings about destruction. If somebody sees themselves as an independent being, just free-flowing in the world, I'm just an organism roaming here, and I could just do whatever works well for me. The result is that I have no purpose, and whatever I want just flies, and it brings destruction. The destruction, the moral frailty of the human is when they don't see themselves as children of Hashem. Lo bana mumam. Their blemish is that they don't see themselves as children of Hashem. And that becomes a generation, ikesh uftalto, entirely in its crookedness, like crooked and oppositional, okay? Crooked and intertwined. And then Moshe asks the question, Hal Hashem tigmul zot? Is this the return you give to God? Is this the response? Are you a nation without any understanding, without any wisdom? Halohu avicha kanecha. He is your father and your nest. He is your nest. Hu asacha, he created you, vayachonaneka, and he gave you your purpose. Hashem did not only construct the human, did not only create the atoms that make up Earth and the universe and life, but when we talk about, as Rosh Hashanah comes, we talk about Hashem is Melech, Hashem is King. The king is what defines the national character. Okay? As opposed to Moshel, which is just a ruler, a distant, a ruler who tells you what to do. A melech is actually a relationship with the nation. It is the heart of the nation. There's a midrash that says melech is moach, the mind, lamed is the heart, lev, and chaf is the klayot and kaved, the liver and the kidneys. These are three aspects of what makes a human a human: the mind, the heart, and the cleansing system, right? Now, kidneys and liver. That is central. It is the essence of the being. King is as opposed to a dictator, which is Moshel. A king is the national character itself. He gives us our creed, our purpose, our direction, the reason for being. And that is the Torah, our relationship with that. And so Moshe's song is this what you give back to Hashem, who not only created you as a being, as an organism, as a living, pulsating being, but he also is the one who blew the breath of spirit into your nostrils, who gave you your essence, right? He is your father, who created you, gave you life. But kanecha, he's also your nest, also what nurtures you and gives you your space. It's his arena that we live in. Huasacha vayechonenecha. He also gave you, he made you and prepared you. He gave you your essence, your purpose, your creed. That's the second part. Third part. Zachor yemot olam. Remember history. Remember the days of the world. Why? Because it's cool? No. Binu sheno dovada, so that you may understand, in a depth of understanding, the years of every generation. From one generation to the next. Every generation. You have to understand. If you want to know what the future means to you and how to get there, you have to look at the past. But not just as a study, but as an understanding of the essence and the direction of where the world's going and what Hashem wants to ultimately bring the world to. The world went through brutal years in order to understand how to be leaders. And that was a development till it came to a place of freedom and individual liberty. And then the world is developing its kindness. It had to do, and it's in the midst of developing its kindness in a way that it never knew and understood. So its first change in kindness was to take everything away from everyone and force kindness. Everybody's got to share everything. And that's destructive. Because kindness has to come where a person gives, not where it's taken from them. So that's in development. And then kindness sometimes is crooked in that it's kind to even those that are cruel. The Gemara says, those who are kind to the cruel will end up being cruel to the kind. We have to develop in each era, an epoch of history, is developing various aspects of what it means to live in the world of Hashem as perfected people. And we have to go through the struggles of learning and understanding that. But in order to get there, we have to look back and say, okay, so what have we learned? What has history taught generation after generation? Not the stories, not how did the Trojan horse get into Troy? Like how did they win that battle? How did Caesar take over Europe? I don't know. Whatever it is that you want. but the messages, the teaching, the learning, the understanding. So the end of that verse says, Sha'al avicha v'yagetcha. Ask your fathers, and they will tell you. Ask your elders, and they will tell you. Now, Rashi says, yeah, you're missing something. Because if you just ask fathers, if you just ask parents, if you just ask a previous generation, they may not understand it either. Avicha means go back to someone who can teach you. So Rashi says, Avicha are the prophets. Why the prophets? Because they can tell you the essence and purpose of creation. Tell you the story that's going to be, because they tell you the essence of what the history is meant to be. The development of the human. You learn Isaiah, you learn Yeshayahu, it's not just the predictions or the past. It's the essence of what meaning of life really is. And then when we look at history, we say, that's what it is. That's what it means. So Sha'ala Avicha v'yagetcha, ask your parents, meaning the prophets, meaning make sure that the lessons of the meaning of history are included in that teaching. Because when Hashem divvied out, assigned property for nations, and separate B'nai Adam, it's the first time that term is used, children of men. We're beginning to become human. We're beginning to learn what it means to be human in the eyes of Hashem. Yes, there have been many humans in the world, but not really that many that understand the essence of being human, the essence of being, of the purpose of humankind. So, Bahafrido B'nai Adam, when he separated B'nai Adam, he separated also boundaries for nations, but ultimately it was just a number of B'nai Israel, just a few of B'nai Israel, that distinction. B'nai Adam, B'nai Israel. There's a purpose that 70 people in B'nai Israel, the children of Israel coming down to Egypt, beginning a change in humanity, where ultimately it'll bring justice to the world, it'll bring kindness to the world, it'll bring the messages of Rachum v'Chanon, of being compassionate and caring, of justice and law. All those things begin there in a number, just 70 people of B'nai Israel. For Hashem is the nation, Hashem's, this nation's portion. Every other nation, as it says in verse 8, has boundaries. So what makes the Irish? Because they're in the Emerald Isle. Now what makes the Arabians, because they're in that the Pan-Arabian Peninsula. What makes you have to go through each nation, right? It's boundaries that defines them. But what makes B'nai Israel, what makes them Am Yisrael, a nation? They actually didn't have a boundary. They didn't have a border. They didn't have a land. They also didn't have an army. They also didn't even have rights. They didn't even have really human existence. They had one thing, for they were the portion of Hashem. The purpose of Hashem's creation of the universe, to teach humanity to become ultimately the world that it needs to be. That's the portion of this people. And therefore, Yaakov is the lot of his inheritance. He found them in a desert, no land, right? In desolation and howling wilderness. Yisovevenhu Yevonanehu. He then encircled them. And here this word means both built them up, boneh, and bina, a depth of understanding. Yevonanehu, he gave them an understanding, a purpose, the reason for the world. They gave them the creed. The Torah is what made them their nation. Their boundaries as opposed to every other nation that has physical boundaries that define them as a nation. What defines Am Yisrael as a nation is the Torah. And therefore, even in exile, we still remain a nation because we have our unifying national creed, the Torah, the purpose of bringing humanity, all of the world, to a place of goodness. And like an eagle stirring up its nest and hovering over its young, he spreads his wings over us and took us, carried us, and Hashem badad yanchenu, it is only Hashem, Hashem alone. Our relationship is not with power. Our relationship is not with might. Yes, it's sometimes needed. That's not it. It is our relationship with Hashem that defines us as a nation, that defines us in our purpose. There's no other gods, no other power. There's nothing else with our Hashem, just that. Hashem made him climb high places on earth and gave us plenty. There is reward. However, the result of that sometimes is that after all of the blessing, in verse 13, 14, and we get to 15, where Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivat. Yeshurun became fat. Yeshurun is the name of Am Yisrael as upright people. Yashar, straight. Yeshurun, a nation of uprightness, became fat. And you become fat, you kick. We reject, when we have plenty, it is so easy to reject a mission of goodness. You become powerful, become lazy, you become proud and scornful, and just kick it all away. The messages are lost. We live in a time that we are learning, sometimes not so well, but we're trying to learn how to remain true to the mission in blessing, in plenty. We live in a time that we've never had this much plenty. A world that even the poor among us, right, the poverty level in America is way wealthier than the wealthy in some other countries today. Never mind what life was like well back when. We have so much blessing and goodness. And sometimes that in and of itself allows us to become petty and throw a fit over minutia, of little stuff. We kick because we have become fat. Shamanta, you became fat. Avita, then you became thick. You first become fat, and then you become thick. There's a difference, right? First, you just have so much, but when you have so much, you can no longer perceive or understand or feel the depth outside. You yourself become clogged. And kasisa is you become a cover. You just become totally blocked. And as a result, you abandon, you forsake the God that created you. Not Hashem, but Elokah, the very purpose of creation. You forget that. There are people that, before they become wealthy, have a very good sense of what it is they're supposed to be doing. But then they lose sight of it. It happens all the time. Power corrupts. Wealth. But the Torah wants us to know how to live with the blessings, with the plenty. So it's not a curse in and of itself. Just we have to learn to remain steadfast and to remain purposeful and to remain connected to to the reason we're here, and not allow that to overtake it. So that is the danger, the abandonment of Hashem who created us, but even more sad. And Vayinabel. And Vayinabel, Hirsch translates as regard as worthless, make withered, make like a carcass, useless. Sur, the rock, or better yet, the one who made this picture. Sur Yeshu Ato, one who is your salvation. Everything you have, you start feeling is your own. No, I am wealthy because I got it. I made it. I attained it. You abandon Hashem, the purpose, and the recognition of, well, actually, it's the blessing from Hashem that you have. And as a result, Hashem will say, okay, well, let others take care of you. If it is not I that have taken care of you, Yakmi Uhu Bezarim, let others be your nest. The Khan is the nest. Let others be your nest. Right? And in the evil, the crookedness is going to anger him. And they start straying from the path, connecting to other ideals, other gods. Now, other things are the ideals of man. Instead of having the purpose Hashem created and the Torah being the central reason and creed of who we are, other things take over. And they become the new God. And you forget God who actually is still forming you today. 19, the next section. Well, Hashem says, okay, if that's the case, I'm going to turn my face and hide it. And you won't, you think you could do this on your own. Let's see. Let's see how that works out for you, man. And the next section says something very difficult. You have swapped me out for a non-God, for ideals and messages that are not real. I'm going to swap you out and allow a nation that's not a nation to attack you. Non-nations are the ones that will fight you. Nations that have no borders, that really are not a nation, they're the ones that are going to fight you. And here's where the fire and the smoke attack, right? It will become consumed by everything that's around us. If we don't see the purpose of creation, then history is just left up to its own running. And as a result of that, there is no direction. It's rudderless, it feels like, until we can then realize, oh, we actually do have to have a purpose. If we just let it go by itself, then it's going to be destructive. Humanity alone, history alone, is brutal if it doesn't understand its purpose. And therefore it says in the next section, if only you would think about it, you and the nations who watch this, and see, wow, history here is pretty profound. It's teaching something deep, that it's not on the virtue of the oppressor that they succeed, or rather for the redirection of the world and the oppressed, so that they can learn and see this is the way the world looks if it doesn't understand itself, it doesn't understand the direction it needs to go to. And as a result, in the end, Hashem will judge and will hold justice for all those that have oppressed people and oppressed his nation. Because the purpose of all of creation, and this is the end of the song, the purpose of all of creation is to recognize that there is no purpose in humanity other than the message of Hashem. And in the end, it will succeed v'chiper ad masar amo, and his people will atone for the earth that Hashem has created. Meaning they will bring about that perfection, because that's the ultimate purpose of history. It's a very deep, big song. It is the essence of encapsulating humanity. The very like all songs, poetry has, you have to read it 100 times to see some of the nuances. But the Song of Haazinu is really the core of the purpose of creation, the purpose of Am Yisrael, the purpose of the Torah, and the ultimate perfection that comes in history, and the recognition that when we see the whole picture and understanding that it is all a part of that whole big plan, Hatzur Tamim Po, that artist, his work is to perfection. The way to enter Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.